it's already October. And this is always one of our most popular calls because everybody wants to know, everybody wants to join in on how to foster good communication with your students. And usually we talk about it, it's Pat and me, and you know, it's our old hat stuff, but we have a really, really great surprise this time because we have Kat Foley, who is a third-year coach. She is coaching 2 students actively right now, one of whom at least absolutely adores her. I don't know the other one as well personally, but certainly Kat, one of your students, really thinks the world of you. And Kat is a mental health therapist, and she specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy, which works very well with our cognitive coaching that we do. So Kat is on the phone, and also very briefly we have a student with us, Alicia Adkins. If you'd like to say hi, Alicia.
Hi.
Alicia is a and I have it all written down here because Alicia asked me to, I asked Alicia what she wanted to say about her, and basically she is a graduating senior at Ohio University in Zanesville, and she is studying criminal justice, and she published a book called Broken Silence, and also I am the lucky owner of one of her paintings. Pat, you wanna?
Oh,
sure. We're not only on the phone, as you know, we also are videoing this. So here for all of you to see is the gorgeous painting that I just got in the mail from Alicia. So we're going to turn the call over to Kat right now, but at the end of the call, certainly Alicia, we will love to hear from you, and people will like to ask questions of Alicia as well. So, Kat?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Again, my name is Kat Foley, and when I communicate with my students, my cognitive behavioral... Hello?
We can hear you. Kat, it sometimes feels like you're talking into a cave. It's,
Gotcha. Okay. All right, let me start again. When I communicate with my students, my cognitive behavioral education and clinical training often propel my thoughts and actions and responses in relationship to my students, and it provides me insight as to the thoughts and behaviors and motivations with my students, and some of this has become quite useful when parlaying it into just generalized communication with your students. As coaches, we have a big responsibility to our students. There's a lot of information that we have to disseminate and get to them, and in return, you know, they need to be able to communicate with us, and we need to create a warm and inviting environment to do that. So when I first sent out an introduction email to my students, whenever I get a new student, the first thing I do is I send an introductory email. And in that email, I provide my contact information, I provide my time zone, and I request their time zone at the same time, just to make sure there's no confusion. I initiate a friendly greeting with a warm, inviting tone in the email, and I give a promise of future informational emails, like the attachments that we get, which we can now get from the website, which is awesome. I love the website. We can also send out attachments that I have in my archives. Since this is my 3rd year, I have attachments from other years on study tips and mathematical study tips, and sometimes I pull those out of my archives and send those at like midterms or finals time. I send a promise of the future informational emails, and then I request their preferred method of communication. Some kids like to text, some are on Facebook constantly, some like the voice behind the call, behind the phone call. And so I go ahead and I initiate a request to find out what is your preferred method of communication. Then I find out what their cell phone limitations are. Some students only have 3 minutes after 7 p.m. and on weekends. And so you have to make sure that you're calling after 7 p.m. in their time zone. 7 p.m. your time may not do them any good. Do they have limitations on their phone calls? Right. And then I also find out if they've been unlimited texting. So then after that, I do an immediate follow-up with a phone call and or voicemail. Because the email is an introduction, I also let them know in that email that I'm going to be calling them so that they can expect my phone call. And even if I don't reach them, I still leave a friendly voicemail. And I may have to do this several times before I get a hold of my student for the first time. And that's okay. I just wait a day or so and call back. But the friendly voice also equals a better rapport. They need to have some kind of frame of reference of who you are besides just an email. I also, during this introduction with my students, I try to determine their framework. I want to get a picture of what my students' lives are like. I went back to graduate school in my 40s, so I have a very clear picture of what their academic life is like. But I want to know a little bit more about them personally, what makes them tick, what are some of their challenges, what are some of their frustrations. For example, is my student a parent with child care issues? Or is my student dealing with a broken down car that she's trying to get to work and all of that? So I'm trying to constantly get an idea of their framework at the onset and then continue that on an ongoing basis as I build my relationship with my students. Facebook. Let's talk about Facebook a minute. I know some people are divided about it as coaches. Some are just, oh, no, I don't even get on Facebook. And other coaches are, yes, I love it a lot. Well, I fall into the I love it a lot category. If you're not on Facebook with your students, you are missing out. There's a wealth of information that allows you to better know your students when you see them on Facebook. You get an idea as they navigate through their virtual world of what their lives are like. And they'll say things forgetting that they have allowed you to be their friend. Facebook is, without a doubt, the world's largest backroom wall. Coaches' individual statuses need to also make sure, when you're doing your own individual Facebook status, you need to make sure that your posts are good and clean. I avoid profanity and crude reposts, but I am myself online. I am me, so I don't have a problem letting my light shine, but I avoid intense political religious debates. When I get online, my students can expect that they can get to know me better just as I can get to know them better. They will see that I'm human. They'll see the issues I am passionate about. They will see a plethora of humorous anecdotes, and they'll have an idea of my political and religious affiliations when they see my reposts and statuses, but they're not going to witness the intense debates or disparaging remarks to others who might have different viewpoints either. I also use Facebook statuses for round-robin communications, such as upcoming midterms or APA formatting posts. I also edit APA formatted documents on the side as a side business, so sometimes I help my students look over their papers to see if their APA formatting is correct. And in general, I will do a lot of APA formatting posts. APA is the American Psychological Association's standard of academic publishing. Many universities use this formatting. Some use other methods, but for the ones who use this, it's helpful to my students. Let's see. So then with the other things with Facebook, it's important to maintain respectfulness towards students. This is their world. They've invited you. You did your friend request. They accepted your friend request, but you need to respect their boundaries. It's very important to, foster their independence and just kind of be there as a monitor in the background. But I do use my CBT background. I challenge their automatic thoughts. I challenge their behaviors online. But I do keep my tone neutral and non-judgmental. And depending on a student's Facebook response, I might send a text message or a Facebook instant message to continue the conversation in private. For example, if I see a student who just posted on their status, my life sucks, my possible responses might be something like, tough week, or midterms can be a hectic time. I give an open door to where they can continue a conversation, and then I will, if it gets personal, I will immediately move it over to text messaging or Facebook messaging, or call them either
is it's coming from the phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's some is
There.
I can still hear
No.
mine. Yeah, I can still hear music. And we can still hear you.
how bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess at least it's not gangster rap.
Yeah, really.
That's it. Thank
I don't
you.
understand.
Yes.
That's very strange.
Okay, I'll just tug along. Moving past Facebook,
Sounds like somebody has
I would like to, and moving past the talking with the home office, gifting as a method of communication. Birthdays, Christmas, or Hanukkah, and care packages. Those are the four main gifting areas I have. I have one student who is an Orthodox Jew, so she celebrates Hanukkah. And so with birthday, Christmas, Hanukkah, and care packages, I'm also careful to make sure that I stay within the confines of the ASC gifting parameters. Usually I buy Starbucks or Subway gift cards and I keep it to a $20 limit. Internship care packages, I tend to cater more to individual tastes and preferences. Now I've got really loud music.
I don't really know what to
Maybe
do.
if we went on mute.
Yeah.
Except Cat. Yes, that's what I'm thinking. Everybody on mute except Cat. See if that works.
Is everyone on mute?
Yeah, I still see music.
I'm gonna put ours on mute for a second.
So have you put it on mute? Star 6.
Star 6.
You are now muted. Sounds like Vivaldi is playing.
Star 6 to unmute.
Christmas and Hanukkah, and then I also send care packages. Usually I will send the care packages at strategic times. Maybe if a kid needs a pick-me-up, or usually when they go trudging off to their internships in the summertime. And I cater the gifting packages, the care packages, a little bit more to individual tastes and preferences. Like I had one kid who was a summer camp intern, and I was sending her care packages that I like to have a Brita water bottle in it with extra Brita water filters, so she could have, convert clean water into purified water, things like that. If you send food, make sure you know the students' food limitations. Like my summer internship student who did the summer camp wanted a lot of snacks. She was craving just, junk food snacks in her care package. Well, she's diabetic, so I was very careful to make sure that all my purchased snacks for her included sugar-free and diabetes-friendly food. I didn't send a lot of, chips and anything with sugar in it. Homemade gifts. I have conversations. For example, if a student says, my boyfriend just broke up with me, what they're not saying is, my weekends and holidays are now empty and lonely. And what I might say in response would be something along the lines like, so how does that make you feel? Now I realize that's the therapist in me talking, but other responses could include, do you have any fun plans for this Saturday night? No, you don't? Well, what about a movie with some of your gal pals? Or, or go into a study group, something like that. So I listen carefully to what they're trying to tell me, and when I read into the inferences, I just don't assume my inferences or what was implied. I then ask questions. I use those inferences to build upon so that I can ask them more questions about what's going on in their world as much as they are comfortable sharing. Now, I walk a fine line. My students know that I'm a mental health counselor and a therapist. Well, that I am not their counselor or therapist. So when a kid is going through a traumatic experience, I've had one kid that has had trauma after trauma in regards to having a lot of friends die this past year. So when I know something is going on in their world that they've shared with me, I'm not their counselor. For one thing, that would be a dual relationship, which is an ethics violation. However, I am at free liberty to suggest that they get counseling, and I also let the home office know that. Because a lot of times we are assuming, okay, these are foster students, they have had trauma, they have had loads of family trauma and drama. But we also need to keep in mind they may experience current trauma that builds upon all this other trauma that they've had. So sometimes it's not PTSD they're dealing with the traumatic stress as it's happening again and again and again. So that is something to keep in mind. If you feel like one of your students is experiencing trauma that is way beyond your depth, and even if it's not beyond your depth and not beyond your purview, again, suggesting counseling with a qualified counselor in their area is still a safe way to go, because we cannot be their counselors since we function with them in a different capacity. We can be a support structure, but I'm not her counselor per se. Moving on past that, cultural considerations and communication are important. I have a lot of experience, professional and personal experience, with working with multicultural populations. So considering the cultural framework that your student is in and the differences that might bring to a relationship is integral to our communication with them. I'm also part of a biracial family, and I'm Caucasian, but my daughter-in-law and grandson are African American. And I also work in Seattle, and we have a large Asian population here. And currently, at 49 years old, I am learning Chinese on the fly so that I can communicate with some of my clients. And this has really moved me out of my comfort zone and into another challenging area. So realize when you're dealing with your students, you may be of one ethnicity or persuasion, and your student may be in a completely different cultural background from yours. What I use is the Hayes Addressing Model, and that came from a book that I had used in graduate school. And basically, addressing is an acronym, and it stands for age, developmental disabilities, disabilities acquired later in life, religion and spiritual orientation, ethnic and racial identity, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, indigenous heritage, national origin, and gender, but more specifically, gender identification. So these are some of the things to consider when dealing with your students if they have a varying cultural background from you. And you can't just assume, well, he's Hispanic, so he thinks this. Well, maybe not. One of my clients was Hispanic, but she wasn't Catholic. with our students, especially when you're dealing with anyone, not just our students, but in the 18 to 30-year-old crowd, when they're just past the, minor age adolescence, still an adolescent certainly at 18, but past being a minor. And they still have so many frustrations about wanting to be heard and not wanting to be misunderstood. And that can be a challenge in and of itself because they change so frequently between the ages of 16 and 30 that having them be misunderstood at one stage could be completely different next year. They might have a completely different framework that they're working from. So it's important to consider their age and their lifespan development. So moving past that, let's talk about when coaches are in crisis. Good communication with our students is all predicated. The reason we want to communicate well with our students is so we can build this relationship that is solid. Everything we do and say to our kids and listen to our students, I know it takes kids, but I have because I'm almost 50, students, everything we're dealing with them, we're doing it so that we can build this relationship. It's like a fragile egg. We don't want to drop it. So we don't want to do anything that would underscore negative habits. And the absence of communication is one of the biggest things that you can do to undermine your relationship with your students. The absence of communication is what I would consider, besides not listening to them, it would be right up there with not listening to them, is not being in communication with them enough. So what if they don't call you back? So what if they don't email right away or anything? I still text them every so often and say, thinking about you today, have a great day today. Or on Facebook, I'll say, oh, wonderful job, hope you're having a good week. I'll touch base with you soon. Just little blurbs to let them know I'm thinking about them and that I care. So what happens when your life is in crisis? I had this happen to me last year. The day before Thanksgiving of last year, my world fell apart. And it was something completely unexpected that demanded my immediate and full-time attention that was going to carry into January. I don't even remember Thanksgiving or Christmas or any holiday parties or anything like that because I was so absorbed in this crisis. But I did have the presence of mind the day before Thanksgiving. One of the phone calls I made was to the home office and an email. I wrote a very detailed email of what was going on in my life. I let the home office know the nature of my emergency, and I also let my students know, and I let them know what they could expect from the length of time that I needed to take care of the situation, and with promises of prompt updates as I had them, and an expected date of return to my coaching duties. And I let them know that this situation was going to take about 6 weeks for me to unravel. So I was looking at about the second week of January by the time the kids went back into their spring term of being unavailable from Thanksgiving until then. Well, this had an impact on the students I had. One, because I had promised to help look over a couple of their papers for APA formatting errors before their finals. And another student I had was facing homelessness during the Christmas situation and Christmas vacation and winter break. So I had some things going on with my kids, with my students, that I didn't want those balls dropped. So not only did I tell the home office what was going on in my world, that I had an emergency that demanded my undivided attention, but I also let them know what my absence would mean and how it would impact my students and how they could help me not drop that ball. Could you send a supportive email? Could you find out if this student does indeed have a place to go? I've been working in contact with this one student's social worker and had some communication with her, so I rebounded that back to the home office and said, here's the contact info, here's this, this is what we're doing to try to find out some ideas to place the student so she's not just on the streets during winter break. So those were some vital concerns I had. And even in the midst of my own crisis, I was able to have the presence of mind to say, oh, these things need to be dealt with, or these students are going to be lost. And not only that, had I just gone about my own business and dealt with my crisis first, I would have lost this trust that I had built so long over the past year, 2 years with these students. Oh, hello?
Welcome to Verizon Wireless. The wireless customer you called is not available at this time. Please try your call again later. Announcement 1, switch 18-3.
I am really...
Welcome to Verizon Wireless. The wireless customer you called is not available at this time. Please try your call again later. Announcement 1, switch 1-3.
Yes.
Let's see if it's
This is Kat. Are we still on?
Yes. I am very sorry. I have no idea what is going on. If it's our end or somebody's end, but Kat, you have been really a trooper, tremendous trooper to you know, it was almost like you've been doing opera.
That's okay. I was also in Toastmasters for a while, so I am good with this. We can fill in the gaps. It's okay. So what I'm talking about is if you're a coach in crisis, it's important to notify the home office immediately and tell them how it's going to impact your students. And then I regale you with my experience of what happened last year over the Christmas holidays and winter break, which was that I was out for 6 weeks. And it was unexpected, and it had major impacts on both of my students. And the home office was absolutely amazingly supportive in not only what I was going through, but also with being able to pick up the ball so that my relationship with my students was not undermined, it wasn't broken, and I didn't lose the trust that they had in me, which was a big concern of mine. I did not want to lose their trust by just going AWOL for 6 weeks, especially during winter finals and winter break and Christmas time and all of that. So making sure that when you have real things happen in your life, they understand that, your students understand it, and the home office understands it. But good communication, which involves that interconnectedness between you and your students and between you and the home office, helps them to better help you. And I was very specific because I keep in mind the fact that you have, several thousand students per year? Is that about right, Tina and Shelley and Pat?
About 3,500 about.
3,500 students. And so saying, oh, gee, Monica or Angela, they need this. No, I say, my student, Angela Smith, for example, she needs this. And so they'll have an idea of matching me up. I make sure I include their last names, and I do little bullet points of what this kid needs. Could you send email? Could you phone her about this? So when I was in crisis, I had like a setup of the email that I sent that told them exactly how I needed them to help me during this time with my students so that my students didn't feel like they had just been cast out into the sea of forgetfulness. So those are important things as we talk about communication, because even though our communication is not all with the students, some of it's going to be behind the scenes, it still has direct and indirect impacts on them, and we have to be mindful of that. Some additional information that I have on cognitive behavioral components. When you first joined to be signed up to be an academic coach with this academic success program, we all did a webinar that had to do with cognitive models. And specifically, I work with cognitive behavioral therapy, which is based on cognitive behavioral models. And just in case you're interested, some of the things that are important about this are interpreting internal and external motivations. Individual motivation is central to understanding human behavior, and if you understand the importance and relevance of your students' motivation, both internal and external, you want to keep in mind how is this relevant to them. Well, it affects their decision-making abilities and their behaviors. There are typically a lot of errors of judgment that happen in 18 to 30-year-olds. Like the webinar when we were training said, when the student says, I just wasn't thinking, they really mean it. They just were not thinking. It's like they have some of these dots, but they haven't yet figured out how to connect them to make a picture. So, and sometimes they don't even have all the dots yet. So they're trying to make a complete picture without having all the information. And that is part of the lifespan development of cognition and behavior. Your cognition is not fully developed in the brain until you're 30 years old. Well, we have kids that are just barely past the halfway mark. We get them when they're 18. Actually, one of my students this year was just 17 when I got her. called in and said I was sick. I said, but that would have been a lie, you know? And yes, you were honest with him, but he gave you a choice. You can go on your ski trip, and then the choice is going to be, the consequence of that is going to be, you're going to get a 0 for that day in class. You're going to lose points. He's already told you what your consequence is going to be, but he did the right thing. He treated you as an adult, and he left the decision with you. It is now your choice to go to class or not to go to class. Well, she ended up going to class, but I also think that was because a huge snowstorm came up at that same time, and it prohibited her driving travel. So it worked out nicely at the end. And so the choice was made for her, and it ended up being the right decision. But I had to laugh in retrospect because she was just totally appalled at the fact that he would even consider taking points away from her when she had been so upset and candid about wanting to go on this trip. So those are the kinds of things that the 18 to 30-year-old group, and all of you have had experiences. If you've been in this program or even if you have teenagers, and by the way, I'm 49, so and my kids are range from 28 to 32 years old, so do the math. I don't advocate teen pregnancy, but on the other hand, my kids were all out of the house by the time I was 39. So I understand this age group very well because I'm already on the other side of it, with my kids being in their 30s and almost 30 years old with my own children. So I know very well what to anticipate. There's not a lot that I haven't seen. And dealing with this age group, most of you have already experienced this, with whether it's with your own children or whether it's with your students, that you need to help them with the follow-through on the communication and on their choices that they make. And their internal and external motivations will give you a huge insight on the direction that they're going to head, even before they know what direction they're going to head. I can see it coming like a train, like a head-on train. Some of the time, when I'm talking, because I know my students, and that's true with the students I've worked with longer, obviously not with the newer students that I've just gotten this year. Some of the cognitive behavioral interventions that are used in therapy are changing thought patterns through cognitive restructuring, changing behavioral patterns, challenging automatic thoughts and negative thought patterns, and identifying their interpretation of events. This is very important. How did your kid and your student identify and interpret events that happen to them? And the biggest way that I can see is fitting into a non-foster care world. They've just come out of foster care. They are adults now. They have this exhilarating freedom of, I can do whatever I want. But then they get into the whole but. They learned what all of us have to go through, whether we were foster kids or not foster kids. Incidentally, I was not a foster child, but I was a foster sibling. I have an adopted brother, a bio brother, and a foster brother that I grew up with, and I'm a biological child. So my parents pretty much did it all. And so I have had experience as a child growing up with a foster sibling. So fitting into that non-foster care world when they hit 18, that's a whole exhilarating aspect of life, whether they were foster kids or not. But now, the ones who were foster kids are having to adjust and realize the whole world is not going to bow down and make allowances for you just because you had trauma as a child. And that can be a shocking revelation. And it's something that they have to kind of come to realize slowly. And all of our communications, all of our help and support that we give them kind of leads them in that direction of being self-sustaining. We want you to be academically successful so that you can be successful in your world in general, so that you can get a good job, so that you're not on welfare, so that you're not, jobless or homeless or anything like that. And sometimes, like the website says, sometimes it's not a college degree. Sometimes it's a vocational program. Sometimes it is going into the military, something else. So helping them find their feet on the ground that they want to stand on and get them help in the direction that they want to go in, that's part of the good communication skills. So that kind of plays into the cognitive behavioral aspect of what I do, not with just my other clients in therapy, but also how it parlays into my communication with my students. And today, I just want to thank you so much for having me as your guest speaker. I appreciate the thought, and I appreciate the sentiments behind it about
thank you from all of us very much. I'm sorry about the music. I'm sorry about Verizon. I'm sorry about all of those commotions. We really, really all appreciated what you have to say, and I would like to sort of segue into questions by asking Alicia what she thought. What, Alicia, did you take as the thought of Cats that resonated the most with you as a young adult, as one of the students who has coaching through our program?
I think for me, I think because my perception of things growing up and things, were tainted in my mind. But when I was going through the program, and still going through the program, I had a mentor or a few mentors that would kind of give me choices and show me what my options are, and communicated to me, like, well, this is your perception, what if we think about it a different way? To start getting my critical thinking skills to develop.
And what else? So the most important thing to you really was that they helped you learn to make good choices.
Yes, and I didn't have skills because I aged out of foster care at the age of 18, and they helped me find possible ways of, they gave me information about housing, how to find a place to live, how to budget, how to sign up for college, how to cook even, and just different ways. I'm so sorry, I'm so nervous.
So the other really important thing about having a coach was the specific things that they taught you, which some of us as parents automatically teach our children, like as you said, recipes. I know my son used to call me up and say, "Mom, how do you make broisy?" which is, old family recipe. And so I guess you had that kind of a relationship with some of your coaches.
Yes.
That's a really wonderful thing, Alicia. I'm very glad of that. So anyway, other questions? We have had a wonderful, wonderful speech. That's not the right word to say. And Kat, I want to say really quickly, it's very cool being called the home office.
Yeah, I like that too.
I feel quite like I'm MI5 or something. MI whatever.
Yeah.
Who am I? Whatever. James
Oh,
Bond.
God.
Mrs. James
Yes.
Bond. So,
Good feeling.
can we open up the floor to questions?
Oh, yeah, of course. Hello?
Yes, does anyone have any questions? Does anybody have any comments? Is anybody there? Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
Oh, everybody must still be on mute. People can unmute your phones.
Yes, I'm here.
Well, Kat, I think that it's pretty clear that what you said was so comprehensive and so interesting and so useful that I guess we don't have any questions. You have hit a home run. So,
Thank you very much.
There's a lot of good information. A lot of good information.
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank
you.
So thank you, Kat, and thank you, Alicia.
you, Alicia. Thank you. Very, very good presentation tonight. Thanks a lot.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.